How many of you have been the opposite? You read something, you get to the end of the page, and then you forgot what you just read?
How many people here want to learn faster? How many people want to remember more? So the number one rule, the art of memory, the art of learning, is the art of attention. So how do you get into those states? One of the ways is just believing that you can. If I take my arm, I put it into a sling for 6 months, does it stay the same? Would it even grow stronger? It would what? It would atrophy and grow weaker. Same thing with your mental muscles. Now, in order to be able to do this, it takes first showing up. 50% of success is just showing up. And so we show up here, and most people don't show up. I think in life, you want to show up. Show up for your health, show up for your relationships, show up for your career, show up for your service. But just showing up, is that just going to get the job done? No, you have to what? Play full out. I think if there's any skill to be able to master in the 21st century, something that's going to give you a real tangible advantage, it's your ability to learn quickly. And only because it's a sign of the times, because digital overload, digital distraction, I mean, so many things vying for our attention. How do you get things done? But when I talk about speed, I'm not talking about frantic speed. You could actually learn faster and actually have an ease, a confidence, peace of mind, be able to succeed, but also have this level of harmony inside of yourself, this clarity of thought. Now, it's been shown in science, the research, by playing more actually creates neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. What's neurogenesis? New growth, new brain cells. So intelligence, in a way, is not necessarily, like Einstein didn't have a bigger brain than anyone here. Probably, it was actually less. He had a smaller brain. But in certain areas of his brain, he had highly connectedness. He did these thought experiments where he would put himself in these brainwave states, specifically theta state. The theta state of creativity. That's the state that you're in when you shower. Have many people notice when you're showering, you come up with all these wonderful ideas? And it's always when you can't write something down, right? And so that's the theta state. That's a relaxed state of creativity. You're inspired. You come up with new ideas. New things come out of you, right? So it puts you in creative state. And so he had more connections in certain areas. And so you could promote that by playing more, right? Because as your body moves, your brain grooves. As your body moves, your brain grooves. You create more neurogenesis, neuroplasticity. Actually, you know what supports it? Novelty. What helps you make more of these connections is novelty and nutrition, just like your body, right? You want to build a physical muscle, you give it what? You work it out, you give it exercise, you give it stimulus, novelty, and then you feed that muscle with nutrition. Same thing with your mental muscles. Just like physically, you want to be stronger, you want to be faster, you want to be more agile, you could be that mentally also. Stronger, more agile, more focused also. Information combined with emotion becomes a long-term memory, right? The state that you learn something in, the mood and the feelings that you learn something in gets attached to what you want to learn. Also, it's going to motivate you to use it more often. If you learn, because here's the thing, learning is not a spectator sport. Now, I want you to think about if you could learn any subject or skill faster, what would it be? Whether it's martial arts or it's Mandarin, whether it's music or marketing, there are subjects that we're interested in, right? And we live in this expert economy, and we want to be knowledgeable about things, because knowledge is not only power, knowledge is profit, right? And so how do you access those things? So I want you to remember, be fast. So how do you get into those states? One of the ways is just believing that you can. Because if you believe you can or believe you can, either way you're right, because all behavior is belief-driven. When it comes to learning, a lot of people say, oh, I have a bad memory, right? They always say, I have memory, or I have focus, or I don't have focus, or I have creativity, I don't have creativity. I want you to scrap that. Creativity is not something you have, it's something you do. Focus is not something you have, focus is something you do. Energy is not something you have or don't have, it's something you do. Memory is not something you have, it's something you do. And what's the benefit of turning it into a do, as opposed to something you have? What's the benefit? You have control over it, because you could put it into a process. It becomes a strategy, because there's a strategy for reading faster. There's a strategy for remembering names. There's a strategy for having focus. There's no such thing as a good or bad memory. There is no such thing as a good or bad memory. There's just a trained memory and an untrained memory. Your brain is like a supercomputer, and your self-talk is a program, it will run. So if you tell yourself you're not good at remembering names, you will not remember the name of the next person you meet because you programmed your supercomputer not to. You have to monitor your self-talk. Monitor your self-talk. If you go around tell people, oh, I have a horrible memory, I'm not smart enough, I'm getting too old, fill in the blank. First of all, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them.
How many of you have been the opposite? You read something, you get to the end of the page, and then you forgot what you just read. And you go back and you reread it. And that's a big problem, right? Because you're wasting your most valuable asset, which is your time. And the key to reading comprehension is asking more questions. If you read a page in a book, get to the end and not get anything out of it, it's because you're not asking questions, because questions are the answer. Questions are the answer because ask and you shall receive. And so that's all thinking is. When you really break down functionally what thought and thinking is, when you're in a corner thinking to yourself, you're asking questions and then you're answering them. And you probably are like, is that true? You notice you had to ask a question to be able to think about that, right? The biggest lie in the personal development industry is that knowledge is power. It is. It's just you feel like you got points because you signed up for a seminar or a webinar, you bought a book and it sits on your shelf. The truth is, what people don't tell you is all the podcasts, coaching, conferences, online programs, none of it works unless you work. You can't read a book on doing like push-ups and get benefit from that. It just doesn't work, right? So you have to do the work. So I'm asking myself, how can I use this? And I'm coming up with all these ideas. That's the creativity part. And then I'm asking, why must I use this? Because if it's not a must, you're not gonna do it because you have plenty of other things to do. Is that fair? Because there's a success formula you capture on the left side of your page: head, heart, hands. You could think about things in your mind, set goals in your head and affirmations, KPIs, your objectives, but if you're not acting with your hands and you're procrastinating.
I'll tell you the worst habit, and you're gonna hate me for saying this. The first hour of the day is touching your phone. It's the worst thing you could do. In between theta and beta, when you're most awake, is a state called alpha. All right, it's a state you go in when you meditate. States you go into when you do deep breathing. State you're also in when you watch television. How many people have ever seen somebody watching television? You're trying to talk to them, but they're watching their favorite show, their sports, or whatever it is, or maybe you're guilty of it too, and honestly, that person is not hearing you. You know that? You're talking to them, but they're so in trance, right? Television programming, it's programming them. They're in such trance, they're in an alpha state. And the alpha state is where your conscious mind is set aside and you're not filtering. It's information just coming in. Alpha state is a great state to learn in though. Great state to learn facts. Great state to be able to learn foreign languages also. Great states to learn information like giving presentations and scripts. One of the ways we work with actors, putting them to an alpha state so they're in this relaxed state of awareness where their conscious mind is set aside and information is just flowing in, like television. And you could control those states because you have a responsibility once you learn the strategies behind it. That our smartphones are making us stupid. It's convenient. I don't want to memorize 500 phone numbers, right? Nobody wants to do that, but we've lost the ability to memorize one. If I take my arm, I put it into a sling for 6 months, does it stay the same? Would it even grow stronger? It would what? It would atrophy and grow weaker. Same thing with your mental muscles. I went out to dinner with 10 people recently. There was 10 of us, and 3 people at the end pulled out their phones to divide the bill by 10. We've lost the ability to be able to do certain things, and so that's where digital dementia is. So smart devices could be extremely convenient, but they could be crippling also. So it could be a balance. One of the most important things to be able to get good at is self-awareness. I ultimately think the expert is not the person on stage. Who's the expert? You are, right? You are the expert on you. I think self-coaching and self-knowledge is really most of it, and so I know you can learn better by looking at yourself and seeing what works for you. Does that make sense? The same level of thinking that's created the problem won't solve the problem. If you were to go in the future, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years ahead in the future, I believe you have wisdom inside of you. I believe you have greatness inside of you and genius that you're not even tapped in those states. If you were to project 10 years ahead of time and look back on this day right now, what does your current self need to hear from your future self? I have a quote that I get quoted on more than anything else. It talks about an egg and stress, that your egg is like your life. that if an egg is broken by an outside force, life ends. But if it's broken by an inside force, life begins. And all great things begin on the inside.